I'm Jack Johnson, and I'm a big Goonies fan as well as a guy that worked on it. I'm Jack Johnson, illustrator, part-time art director, and a painter. I live on the central coast of California. I think I was recommended by Bo Welch or someone else who was an art director at the time to Michael Riva to work on a film called Goonies for Steven Spielberg. And I think the biggest surprise was the surroundings for me. I'd only been in 3 or 4 films. And I was still adjusting to what they were looking for and how far to go with designing a set as far as detail and that sort of thing. Even just getting used to working charcoal on 1000H paper to be able to make blueprints and sepias and so forth. But the building we worked in was an amazing place. It was brand new. They'd done it just for Steven Spielberg. It had a full ceiling skylight that could be controlled with a drop cloth. It had koi and nice little ponds outside the windows. And the equipment was of the latest. So this basic idea is the same on every film. For an illustrator, you read the script, and you get in your mind ideas or interpretations of what these words might mean visually. You work through a production designer like Michael Riva, who interprets and tries to get across to you what he's thinking. And then you come to a series of where a lot of the time a guy in my position is giving him ideas or thoughts or whatever, and then when you work, my favorite way of working is with thumbnails first to make things faster and quicker and simpler, and then take it up to maybe larger illustrations. And we were allowed to go down to the set, so occasionally we could actually go down and see them shooting part of what we had designed, which was a lot of fun. And in one case, the ship, Michael Riva was kind of old-fashioned about it, and he wanted to build a real ship. Even if it was 3/4 or 7/8 size. We had the biggest stage in the country. We had a pit with a huge amount of water available. And however, it was going to be a little more expensive, and the powers that be didn't feel they wanted to spend that kind of money. So one of the things I did was design a captain's cabin, so which there was some relation to in the script. A bunch of skeletons sitting around a table and various gold coins and swords in the floor, a tilt. Anyway, by doing 3 or 4 of those that actually sets that fit into the ship itself, we could save enough money on stage space and building separate sets to make up the difference, and they were finally convinced to go ahead and build it. I have a feeling if I really knew what was going on, it probably was intriguing to Spielberg to actually do it. But at any rate, it was one hell of a build. I got to be involved in not in designing it, but being able to show them exactly what it would look like in exactly a position and with any lens they wanted, so they knew the parameters of how far back they could go to show this set, which was pretty huge. And I was overjoyed that I actually built it, and we could run around looking at it. You could occasionally sneak a friend on to look at the secret set. I also, of all the kinds of movies that I've worked on now after 27 years, This was the kind that I liked best. I think I mentioned Toys, for example, was a film where everything was make-believe. So you were having a lot of fun designing things that had never been seen before. So when you want to go down underneath and have the kids being chased and trying to find clues, and I mean, you know, first of all, you got to get over the idea that in tunnels there is no light. So it's all make-believe anyway, because you have to light it if you're going to see kids do anything. But aside from that, the different levels we went through with tricks, and I had one, Wild Willie's chamber, that they didn't use, but what I was trying to do was put him in, the skeleton in sort of a concave area of a wall in the cave. And I had one arm hanging up, and I had things hanging around his neck, and a scabbard and whatever. And my idea was that they had to reach in behind his spine to get the clue. And when they did, this arm would come down and hit him, and there'd be noise and whatever, and scare everybody and so forth. Anyway, we went through a whole series of things like that. A tank that would fill up with water, and they had to find out the secret in the bottom to pull something that would then open something which would get them out of the trap of the water. One was climbing across a really heavy rope or a wooden timber to go into what was called a skull cave. So the cave sort of had an outside exterior of at least looking somewhat like a skull. And that was the process all the way through. So I'll skip that one and go on to Harrison Ford. At one point, he all of a sudden was one of the most popular guys in the country. They made a large publication that was all about him, his background, everything about him, being a finished carpenter and so forth. And Spielberg had invited him to come into the set for lunch. And so Harrison Ford shows up, he comes through the main door, and as soon as his eyes adjust to the light, he sees about 30 people sitting in chairs, leaning up against walls, and they're all reading about him in this little publication, because Spielberg had sent guys out to buy everything in town. And Ford's, just blew up right away. And he said, yeah, okay, I got it. Big deal. Anyway, it was fun for everybody. I wasn't down there, but the story flew around the studio. Dick Donner, the director, would go berserk from time to time because these kids would be chewing gum. They wouldn't pay attention sometimes. They'd talk with him. I mean, it was just chaos. When he finally got a big blowhorn to yell at him, scream at him. Anyway, by the time the picture ended, he was a basket case. And he'd been practically living there in a trailer next to the stage. And Spielberg, in a magnificent gesture, sent he and his wife to Hawaii to stay in his summer place over there. So the day they got there, Donner and his wife went down to the beach, and they came through the front door, and in the living room were all these kids sitting there slumped over the furniture, reading comic books and whatever, and he just lost it. He said, whoa! Spielberg had actually sent all the kids and their families over too, which was a fantastic gesture. Well, it was also, it was a lot of fun to go up to Astoria and experience over 5,000 people who had come to Astoria to celebrate the movie over 3 or 4 days. And it just blew me away. And I sold some of my work to people from Denmark, Paris, England, Scotland, London, and I just couldn't believe that that movie had generated that much interest. And I think if you go back to the original concept of even when we finished the movie, nobody had any idea that it would become a cult film the way it has today. Pretty amazing. On several movies, and it wasn't that unusual, illustrators would not be allowed to go to the locations. And it was always kind of upsetting because anytime you went to a location, you had all kinds of other ideas of things that you would see to create from. And in this case, I didn't get to go to Astoria, and I was given a couple Polaroids, little black and white Polaroids of what the house looked like. So, and of course, they're never the right angle. So I had to interpolate, not only try and take that little thing and see it in a large scale, but then to turn it and luckily for me, by years of architecture behind me, it was very helpful for things like that, as well as the perspective. Well, after they get into the restaurant in the lighthouse, I didn't actually have what I needed to draw this, and I actually had some problems in this area, and I had to come in and make some changes. So in my opinion, this is not a very good illustration, but that's what the interior was supposed to look like. And when they escape from the restaurant, they have to come down into the caves somehow. So this was just one version of what it might have been, as if there'd been some sort of a cavern underneath all along, and you see a shadow of the first person coming down. Everything is really rough, almost like a mine feeling. And this is a sepia made from a charcoal sketch on 1000H paper run through a blueprint machine with a little white pencil help. One of the major sets it turned out to be was the organ of bones. And the idea being that there is this peak of dirt, soil, whatever, that's coming up out of a deep cavern. And originally it wasn't that. We were going to use some water, but eventually it became something that they had to step across to get onto. And as far as the organs were concerned, I was trying to take bones and make them into a sort of a feeling that would look like an organ, and then arrange them in some fashion that there could be some as keys, as if they were fingers. And then it became a situation where she had to hit the right notes to be able to collapse another slab that would then allow them to get across the crevasse. These were just sort of really, really rough ideas of the same thing. There was also what was called the compass room, where the basis of the floor would remind you of a compass. And there would be a lock system so that once they were in there, if the room would be flooded and they would be trapped. So they had to figure out the clue to be able to open the source at the bottom of the pit to be able to let the water out so that they could survive. This was a Michael Riva design of a bowling ball that would travel through the side of the hill, come out, catch a net, which would throw it up in the air, which would hit something else, which would then take out the guys that were chasing him. He loved those kinds of things. More of the same. More how would this be designed and how would you approach? This one was a little more lethal in feeling as if you could get it ensnared in these curved bones almost looking like teeth. What else have we got? Well, this is a better illustration. This is imagining that this guy is now floating, they came in through a hallway, they got locked in, and then he's floating, they're up at the top where they just don't have much more air, and he dives down and he pulls the right pin and all the water goes out and they're okay for the next trick. Those guys are no, let's see, yeah. This was Wild Willie's chamber. And the idea, I'd mentioned it earlier, that the skeleton would be in this crevice in the wall, and there would be arms hanging by chains, and when they reached in to a double altar-like pile of candles and melted wax, when she pulled it out, the arms would come down and scare the hell out of all the kids. This one did wind up in the film, which was the where they crossed over to the Skull Cave. And that's the house, or one version of it. On day before yesterday, I got an email, and it was about a guy that had a piece of wood about this big, rounded on the top, cut off, obviously with a saw. It was in plastic with a note underneath that said it was absolutely from the Goonies house. And the guy's had it for years, and he just doesn't know if it's real or where it came from. And so there's this long list of everybody's commentary. Well, it came from the fence. It's got to be the fence. It can't be the fence. The thing I found unusual about it is that there was no comment as to where it did come from, or no picture, which you would have thought if somebody was going to take a piece of that and they were going to sell it for a lot of money, that there'd be some background. So there's also a Victorian sort of curved pieces that go on top of each other on the upper part of the house. But it didn't seem to fit that either. So I have a feeling the guy got had. Well, one of the worst memories was having the feeling that there was a guy taking notes about all this stuff that shouldn't have been, as if he was an informant or something to somebody outside of our group. Don't know whether that was true or not. It was just a bad feeling. I think the highlight is when you get a good sketch or set or illustration and you really do feel good about it and it gets in the movie. That's the best, because you know you got a payoff, I guess. Some of it's egotistical. You know, you can point to your girlfriend or your wife and say, yeah, I did that. I designed that. It's one thing to draw a set and do the perspective and even understand the scale that you're talking about. But the first time I came through those double doors and saw the ship with this incredible walled background and the water and the reflection in the water, it was dumbfounding. I was totally impressed. Much better than even I expected. In some cases I was disappointed, because the real set didn't look as good as what I thought I designed or what I thought it was going to look like. And in other cases, it was superior. So it's, you know, you win some, you lose some. Of course, at the time, I thought it was a crazy movie. You know, these kids being chased around through caves and whatever. But when you see the end result and you realize it's practically 3 generations later, and the kids and the teenagers are just as excited as they were the previous generation, you realize it had a lot going for it. And I'm happily surprised it was so successful. You know, that was awfully nice. I was invited to go see the inside of the house, primarily because of Fred, who introduced me to her, the owner. And we went inside, and she had made some wonderful changes, and she described it. She was very proud of where the floor had changed and where a wall was knocked out and so forth. But it was, you know, your first reaction is to try and start and look and compare to where's that, and wasn't there a railing there, and all of that. It was, and then going upstairs was even more impressive to see that area, and especially the view from the windows. Yeah, that was a big treat to be able to go inside the house. I came back a year after the 35th?
Yeah.
And met her again. I invited her out to dinner. And it was fun, but things were getting a little difficult in her neighborhood and around the area. So she was not the same happy person I'd seen the year before, but she was hanging in there.